A warning shot. Are America's most vulnerable being quietly turned into political leverage? Behind closed doors, funding freezes, mass firings, and a little-known executive order may be unraveling the very systems meant to protect families, children, and whistleblowers. Costs are soaring, safeguards are vanishing, and critics say this isn't accidental, it's strategic. From childcare to healthcare to pardon fraudsters, the pattern is raising alarms few are talking about. And what happened next inside that hearing is the moment that changed everything.
Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, and our witnesses for being here today. I believe in protecting our social services and recognize the need for comprehensive legislation that ensures transparency in the collection and use of federal funds to support these critical programs that serve our communities in need. The resources provided through social services ensure the welfare of the everyday person and family, and these resources and individuals deserve to be protected. These protections should come at all times, not just when politically beneficial. What we're witnessing from President Trump and this administration is an attempt to use social services and the welfare of the American people as pawns to promote their political agenda. Instead of caring for the challenges of the average person, this administration has deprived them of the very things that the president promised, which is affordable health care, housing, and relief from the rising cost of living. Through rolling back essential health care affordability, cutting funding for assistance programs, implementing harmful tariffs, and advancing legislation such as the One Big Ugly Bill, the administration's actions have ultimately caused more harm than good for the American people. Reports show that since taking office, President Trump has raised the average cost of living. Health insurance costs have risen by hundreds of dollars for the average person, with insurance plans increasing by more than 20%. Housing costs remain at an all-time high. And everyday grocery items show a steady increase, with prices rising by 15 to 20%. We cannot pick and choose when to care for the American people. The actions of this administration show a pattern. They first target our most vulnerable communities and then gut the very resources to help them. Today, it is our Somali communities and our child care assistance. Tomorrow, it could be your communities and the resources you and your family rely on for well-being. At its core, this is about the well-being of the American people. If we truly cared about those we have sworn to represent, we would be working to dismantle all the challenges they face, not just the ones that serve political interests. Mr. Baloo, President Trump has recently made comments on efforts to freeze child care funding in California, Colorado, Illinois, and New York. Would these actions benefit or harm children and families?
Oh, of course they're going to harm it.
President Trump has fired thousands of employees across critical departments and has issued Executive Order 14356, restricting agencies from filling vacant positions or creating new ones unless approved under the order or required by law. Can you speak to how these actions could harm the government's ability to root out waste, fraud, and abuse?
Absolutely. So, it's going to make it harder both to administer these services and then to identify fraud in the first place. One of the things that I'm particularly concerned about is to go after fraud. One of the easiest ways to do it is to prosecute tax crimes. The challenge that we've got right now is the administration has announced a plan to disband the tax division of the Department of Justice entirely. And that's going to make it much harder to prosecute these sorts of crimes.
And can you speak from your work as a federal prosecutor on how President Trump's actions have contradicted his promises to the American people?
Well, to the extent that this administration says that it cares about waste, fraud, and abuse, it seems like that is a selective care. You can look at cases like Paul Walzak, who, was convicted of fraud and withheld $10 million to his own employees in nursing homes. His mother attended a $1 million plate fundraiser with the president, and Mr. Walzak was quickly pardoned. This has happened literally dozens of times where favored defendants either had their prosecutions dropped or were pardoned entirely.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Grofman from Wisconsin.
Sure. I'm sorry we had another briefing in the building, so I don't want to go over past things. But during your initial testimony, Ms. Rarick, you talked about people being threatened who are whistleblowers. Do you know who those people were? Were they like people who made money off of this, political operatives? Could you elaborate on that a little?
Yes, thank you. So the people that were doing the threatening were the supervisors and directors within the state agencies.
So state employees were physically threatening whistleblowers.
They were saying things like, what happens if you lose your home, right? Because if you lose your job, you lose your home. They had pictures in their personnel files of their own homes and their cars. They asked where their children went to school and where their bus stop was. So there was direct threats and indirect threats.
Okay. Were any of these people brought to justice?
What unfolded in that congressional hearing wasn't just another partisan exchange. It was a warning signal. A warning about how power is being exercised, about who feels the impact first, and about what happens when the systems designed to protect everyday Americans quietly start to break down. Missouri Congressman Wesley didn't raise his voice. He didn't grandstand. Instead, he laid out a methodical case, one that connected social services, rising costs, staffing cuts, and selective enforcement into a single troubling pattern. And the reason this matters right now is simple. The consequences aren't theoretical anymore. They're already showing up in family budgets, childcare access, healthcare costs, and even inside government agencies themselves. At the center of the hearing was a straightforward premise. Social services are supposed to protect people, not be weaponized. Bell opened by emphasizing transparency and accountability in how federal funds are collected and used. That alone isn't controversial. What followed was, he accused the Trump administration of treating essential services, healthcare, housing assistance, childcare, as political tools rather than public responsibilities. Not by accident, by design. Bell pointed to funding cuts, tariff policies, and sweeping legislation that, taken together, have raised the cost of living instead of lowering it, despite repeated promises to do the opposite. Then came the numbers. Health insurance premiums climbing by more than 20%. Housing costs stuck at historic highs. Grocery prices rising steadily, sometimes by nearly 20%. Short sentences, clear cause and effect. The message was blunt. When support systems are weakened, the damage lands first on vulnerable communities and then spreads outward. Here's where the testimony moved beyond policy and into consequences. Bell questioned recent efforts to freeze childcare funding in major states, California, Colorado, Illinois, New York. The answer from witnesses was immediate and unequivocal. These actions would harm children and families. But the deeper issue wasn't just funding. It was capacity. Thousands of federal employees across critical departments have been fired. An executive order now restricts agencies from filling vacancies unless explicitly approved. On paper, it's framed as efficiency. In practice, witnesses said it does the opposite. Fewer staff means weaker oversight. Weaker oversight means more fraud slips through, not less. Then came one of the most overlooked revelations, the administration's plan to disband the tax division of the Department of Justice. Think about that for a moment. Tax prosecutions are one of the most effective tools for uncovering large-scale fraud. Remove that tool, and enforcement becomes selective, not comprehensive, which leads to the contradiction Bell highlighted next. The administration says it cares about waste, fraud, and abuse. But according to testimony, that concern appears to apply unevenly. Witnesses reference cases where convicted fraudsters receive pardons after personal or financial connections to political power. One example involved millions of dollars withheld from nursing home employees, followed by a pardon after a high-dollar fundraiser. Whether legal or not, the optics are unmistakable. Enforcement for some, forgiveness for others, and when whistleblowers tried to intervene, another layer emerged. Testimony revealed that state employees, supervisors, and directors allegedly threatened whistleblowers directly. Photos of homes, questions about children's schools, subtle reminders of what could be lost, careers, homes, security. That kind of pressure doesn't just silence individuals, it chills accountability across entire systems. So where does this go from here? Congressional oversight is likely to intensify, especially around staffing cuts, enforcement gaps, and the treatment of whistleblowers. States may push back harder against federal funding freezes, potentially setting up legal challenges. Politically, the issue isn't just policy, it's trust. If voters begin to see a pattern where protections disappear, costs rise, and accountability becomes selective, the implications stretch well beyond this administration. And for agencies already stretched thin, the risk is structural. Once expertise leaves, rebuilding it takes years, not months. At its core, this hearing wasn't about one bill, one executive order, or one administration. It was about whether government still functions as a safeguard or as a lever of convenience. Wesley Bell's warning was simple but unsettling. Today, it's one community. Tomorrow, it could be yours. So here's the question viewers are left with, and it's one worth debating. When oversight weakens and accountability becomes selective, who actually pays the price, and how long before everyone does? Let us know what you think.